Hello, welcome wherever you're coming in from. I'm on the East Coast, so it's a reasonable 9 o'clock here. Before we really get started, I think I'll wait a minute or two and just see if we get a person or two more to come in. Otherwise, I'll go right ahead. So, as you can see, I'm Robin Long, and this presentation is going to be about a project that I started with a team of people called Kids Afield, which basically uses technology to connect kids to nature. So, as we go along, just to acknowledge the sponsors that make all of these conferences possible for us, in this case. The sponsors for this particular conference. If you would here click on the pointer and indicate where you are coming from, and then you just can mark it on the, as I realize iPads can't do this, but still, it's wonderful to see. Geez, we have both sides of the U.S. and India. So that's quite wonderful. Well, not quite. I guess Arizona isn't quite the other side. So basically, just to give you a little background on who we are, this is the Kids Afield team, and it consists of myself, this is me, Robin Long. I went into education basically through the back door, in that when I was in college in the late 60s, I did everything I could to not be a teacher because people told me I should be a teacher, and it was a time in which it seemed like there were more exciting things to do. So for a number of years, I was a Russian language major. Down the road, I moved to a Rochester area with my husband, helped him in a pottery. We had a couple of children. And I arrogantly decided I would homeschool them, that I could do a better job. Ultimately, this led to the fact that after trying to start programs in the local school there, trying to use the school half days, which resulted in my making a presentation to the Commissioner of Education in New York State, Gordon Umbach, and having it turned down, I decided that I would go back and become a teacher formally. Where I spent the last 25 years or so is up here at the Harley School. It's an independent school, which gave me a great deal of freedom as a teacher. It wasn't really my intention to go there, but it was the amount of freedom that I had that led me to stay there. And I worked basically in the middle school. 2 years ago, I realized that I love my job, but if I ever was going to do anything on a larger palette, particularly work with environmental issues, that it was time to leave the classroom. During the year that I took off, the first year, I became aware that there were two teachers in our school, Marilyn and Gail, who already had been working with their children in the environment at school. We are a K-12 school, so I had very little interaction with them as a middle school teacher. However, they were really eager to work with somebody who had the environmental expertise, and I was really, had come to feel, for a number of reasons that I'll explain as we go through the slides, that working with young children was perhaps really, in the global picture, the bigger reason going to be more successful. So I use between the two of them, they say they have over 50 years of environmental education with young kids. So between the three of us, we kind of bounce around and figure we have almost 100 years of educational information. So before I go on and explain more about Kids Afield project, I'd like to just get a quick overview. There's so few of us, but you could tell me if you go up and click on the little A next to the hand up there and pick what your educational focus is, as clearly as is closest it comes to what you see there. Okay, well, actually there's so few people here, we can just do it that way. If you actually clicked on the A, then we'd get the poll, but we can see we've got several others. And I'll go ahead and see if people did click on the poll. Okay. So we have people kind of all over the grade levels. This is an overview of what I'm going to cover this morning. Basically why, what, how, and the learning that we gained and the children gained. All the resources, everything that I'm mentioning, I do have archived in Storify, and near the end of the presentation, I'll go to the site. I believe also that Peggy is putting a link to the Storify site in the chat so that people can access it that way. Well, the what of this project, and it's one reason that I believe it really has long legs. It's fairly simple. Put the technology in the kids' hands and have them photograph and explore the earth via cameras. The why is a little bit more complicated. The two teachers that I worked with had been working with their children in the classroom, and they felt they were learning. They could give you a lot of factual information, what a food chain is, and so forth. But they weren't really connected. They didn't really have ownership of it. Meanwhile, I've been doing quite a bit of work, and I do have, I'm going to mention real quickly, the Stanford D-School Design School materials, which are in my Storify site too. Stanford has a wonderful program on design thinking that works with, it's part of their university, but they have really put forth a huge number of materials for K-12 educators, and they are totally usable. I've done presentations just using their materials, and I worked with them a lot in my own classroom. One of their ideas in design thinking is that before you start designing things, you need to empathize with the people with whom or for whom you're hoping to develop something. And they had an activity there that involved the camera. And that's really what kind of rang a bell with me, looking at the needs of these younger teachers, that the camera could be the way, because you're really, when you're taking a picture and you're looking at somebody else's pictures, you're seeing what they see. Plus, you're seeing the world yourself in a very small way. It's a very personal kind of connection. But then when you share those pictures, you're sharing something very personal about yourself with others. So those were two of the main reasons. The fact that the camera eye would focus children's attention in a place that they want to look, and also that this empathy piece that the camera could provide. There was also, well, there is a great deal of research done that say if you look at today's adult environmentalists, you'll see that they really emerged not so much from citizen scientists, which is a whole different track. It's doing science research as a citizen for science, but more citizen naturalists. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on because there's some new research out connected to it that's quite fascinating. But really, with naturalists, you're looking at children who are going to explore and learn and record, and that interest, that connection is what's going to ultimately produce adult environmentalists. So this is a very exciting way to think about it. Here another listing of reasons. This is an article that I have in Storify. This person, David Fitzsimmons, has done a lot of nature photography with kids. And again, these are reasons I came up with too, but he said them and put them together in this very nice article. I'm not going to read the PowerPoint for you, but I do want to go down to this bottom one, hybrid thinking. because I don't think that is off the top of one's head. It's like, what is this about? So I do have some more information over here. Okay, hybrid thinking. Richard Love. If you're not environmental educators, perhaps you don't know about him, but you might have heard of the book, Last Child in the Wilderness. He's a well-known environmental educator, and he is very strong on feeling that connecting kids, having them take technology, which is intrinsically interesting to them, and they're all using it, and find a way to bring that excitement into the outdoors is just a win-win way to ensure that they stay connected to the outdoors. Because the outdoors is always interesting to kids up to a point, but as they grow up, they get further away from it. They think it's dirty, they think it's bug, they think it's yucky. And so he has written quite a bit about this need. On the other hand, E.O. Wilson, who is the ant biologist, perhaps you know him as the ant biologist, he's written about ants extensively. He feels the same way, but he states it in a different way. He thinks that a scientist, and he's really talking about becoming more than just an environmentalist or an adult with environmental values, but that a scientist, the ideal scientist, he's worked for years at Harvard, he has discovered it's not the kids who are necessarily the brightest, but it's the kids who can think like a poet and work like a beekeeper. I really love that idea of the poet and the beekeeper. And in that sense, the camera could be said to be like the poet. It's looking at the aesthetics of the world and capturing a very select part of the world that the user wants to share. And then the beekeeper part would be the technology and sharing later on. So here it's summarized down here. It's technology plus natural world experiences. In all of the research that I came across, I saw again and again the need that for promoting children's connection to nature, first place they need the time to explore outdoors. That time has been pretty much stripped from them in many, many places. Children are more than ever in adult supervised situations. Now, our program is adult supervised, I have to say. Obviously, we have adults there. But what they're saying is a lot of children used to connect to nature simply because they lived in environments where they could run outside and do things, and not in a adult-directed manner. But that adults are also important if they are adults who are demonstrating that they really respect and enjoy the outdoors, and more importantly, that they really respect children's feelings and ideas about the outdoors. And this is, again, as I explain how we use the cameras, we really enable the kids to become the agents of what they're exploring in the outdoors. And that's a really, really important part of the program. I also have here 3 key resources. More information about them, obviously you can find by linking. I am going to mention, I'm highlighting them because I think they're really useful. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology, if you want to do, I know their focus obviously is birds, but if you want to do anything with the outdoor world, they have wonderful online tools. They have an incredible library of animal sounds, not just birds. They have lots of free materials. They have a wonderful program called My Backyard, where you can use Google Earth to map the schoolyard. Kids can map their home yards. I can't say enough about what they provide free, and their materials, which they also provide, are very well thought out. Also, the NAAAE, where we presented Kids Afield last fall, has a new program called Natural Start Alliance, which is for children and nature. And what they have come to realize, because they're an old environmental organization, that working with young children has really been neglected in the environmental field, except you have these few schools that are totally, preschools that are totally nature focused. But outside of that, it's been a neglected field. And then this again is Richard Louvre over here, who wrote Lost Child in the Woods and also The Nature Principle. He has an online site called Children in Nature. It promotes all sorts of projects and ideas. So there are just three really key resources that I encourage anybody who wants to work with children, and not just young children, well, that's my focus here. They're very good resources. Okay, so as to the how, we elected to use kit cameras, and people have asked me why at different times, and I think the answers are straightforward and presented here. There's nothing to our mind demeaning about, it's really like a Montessori approach, I guess, let's put it that way. It works very, very well, and they are, I'll tell you, incredibly hardy. I had a child drop one in a creek, and we dried it off, and it works fine. There is one downside to them, which is they require batteries, and they are expensive. You get quite a lot of pictures for them, but still, I would suggest that you check, if you're interested in this project, if you check with your local hospitals. I only found this out by accident through a parent who happened to be a surgeon, but apparently it is common practice that in operating rooms they have a number of tools that take AA batteries, and for safety reasons you can only use them once. So they accumulate a vast resource of batteries, and if you can connect with them, it's a great source of free batteries. Introducing the use of the cameras with the children, take time to do this. They are excited about it. The first classroom that we piloted this in, and really the main classroom, is the independent school I was at, the Harley School. I recently, and it took practically 2/3 of the year, to locate a city school who's interested in this project. And this isn't because so much from lack of interest, but anybody who is out trying to work in schools, private or public, is probably aware that whether it's the core curriculum in the public sector or just high parent expectations in the private sector, everybody feels overwhelmed. One of the things that I think is a real strength of the Kids Afield project is, as we go through this, be aware that the amount of time that is given to this project in the classroom is only 40 minutes a day, plus the time it takes to load pictures, and that's a separate topic that I'll discuss later. But I did finally get into a city school. It's 22 kindergartners. They were tremendously enthusiastic, as one might imagine. But the reason you take the time to do it is really to address how we're going to use the cameras, what they're for. Right away I said, what do these cameras also probably do? And they all said, play games. And I said, you're absolutely right. But guess what? I don't need to teach you guys how to play games. We're not going to use the cameras that way. We're going to use them as a tool. In the first classroom, they really stressed the fact you're using them as a scientist. Which is a fine way to go also. The kids were, once they understood that, and at the end of this was the first time I had the kids use them, was this week, and one of them said, so we're never going to play games with them? I said, no, never. The cameras also have other, you can add mustaches and do all sorts of things. So you have to take time to go through and decide ahead of time what your goals are, and make that real clear with the kids. And in the first classroom that I went into, they take a great deal of time to set up their classroom on something called the Responsive Classroom, which is a program in which children learn to take ownership and set class rules and so forth. The second classroom, I wasn't allowed the freedom to do that. We didn't have the time. But I will tell you, it worked very well nonetheless. And the other part of this is to early on, and it's not even that we have to show them what we're valuing their interests. Once you start working with kids with cameras, you will be amazed at how quickly they start to discover things that I hadn't thought of as a teacher myself. For example, this class I was in last week, we couldn't go outside because it was raining, and I decided with the teacher, I was working from her goals. She wanted the kids to take pictures of things. They're working with what's alive and what's not alive. So in the classroom, it was an interesting discussion. Right away, you have inquiry that comes out of the project. What about the paper? What about the wood? And so forth. So various kids took pictures, and then at the end, I realized that one little girl, and here we had these big windows right in the classroom, had gone and taken pictures of the trees outside. So it shows the narrowness of my thinking. It didn't even cross my mind to do that. So that's wonderful. The first program we went to, birds became the focus, and I'll explain how that happened later on. In terms of the learning, there is student learning. There are different ways to assess it. We've used authentic methods for the most part, which has included taking the kids' pictures and sharing them with each other and talking about them inside. We've also had them do writing. That's what you see them doing, different things. They are working with partners. We set it up so that a camera for every 2 kids. I think that's a good way to go. For one thing, if you're the one who has to load up all the pictures, it limits how many cameras you have to be connecting to computers. But the bigger thing is that almost all science, almost all work, almost all human endeavors are partner work, and the kids learn to support each other and share with each other. So here they are, they're looking at their pictures, they're writing about why they picked a certain picture, what it meant to them, or they're drawing pictures. This was a looped classroom of K1, so there's kids who were just starting to learn how to write or couldn't write at all, and then kids who were readers and writers. The first school, which is, again, this was learning for us. We've been taking the kids outside. They found it interesting, clearly. They like to take their pictures. But it turned out that the school was going through, there was some other program going on that had to do with vanished species. They were brought into this, they were aware of this because of various activities at the school. So one day we went outside to look at different environments. As a matter of fact, I went around with a camera and they pointed to different sites and talked about why they were good for birds. And from that day forward, for the entire year, every time we went outside with cameras, they were really looking at the world from the viewpoint of how does this world, how is it important for birds? We did all sorts, we built on this interest. And that was part of the way we got connected with Cornell, was because they became such an important resource. It was also, it's amazing how much bird looking you can do through the windows. So while we had all sorts of interests that wove in and out during the year, it was this connection with the birds that really made the outdoor environment special to them. It's very overwhelming if you just go outside and look around. And if you can find an interest out there, for E.O. Wilson is a child who was ants. He followed ants every place. So this was a project that did come from from the kids. I will say that birds are, if you're interested in environmental education, they are a wonderful natural resource because they're there all the time. Many of them travel half the world, and so it's a great way to hook to the outdoors. Okay, before I get to sharing, I want to talk about another side, and this has really come out from our experiences with the kids. This is more about our learning. Their learning was pretty easy to document. We have videos of them, we have things they wrote, we have their pictures and the slides that they've shared. But the role of imagination and play came home real big with us through a certain event that happened, and it led me, as an environmental educator myself, I've always felt a bit frustrated. Even with my middle school kids, it was clear to me that their excitement is so much more than looking at the outdoors and seeing, oh, that's a macroinvertebrate, that's a this, that's a that. They want to jump. They want to go to what they're drawn to. I have here, I want to share some information from two naturalists, and one of them, John Burroughs, goes quite far back. And his thought was, yes, is there a question?
Yes, Maureen was wondering if you could say more about the Spring Sprout project.
Spring Sprout?
Mm-hmm. If you're not sure.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, you just go on, and maybe she'll elaborate in the chat.
Was that, yeah, okay, I don't know. Was that something I said? Maybe she could define what she meant.
No, so you just go right ahead.
Okay. No, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that, but she could share it with us later on. Okay? So, but anyway, his point here is that it's really not about the way environmental education has emerged, and I'll go to another slide here. This is somewhat contentious, but I think it's a really interesting piece of research. The article is in Orion magazine, which is a well-known environmental magazine. And what this research shows is that children experience nature in two ways. There's the wild experience, which is taking and eating, where they're agents of their own learning. This is the kind of experience that E.O. Wilson, and John Muir, who started our park system, their childhood was full of things like this. And it included things like actually playing with gunpowder in the outdoors, climbing trees, making potions, all sorts of play that children are now not allowed to do because people are afraid for them. It's also true, and so what we have much more is domesticated learning, which is what the Scouts and school programs are. It's very much about look, don't touch, you know, and really, so what research has shown is that when you look at these two experiences, that the wild nature experiences correlate with adult environmental values when they're grown up, but additionally with the behavior that actually makes people work in the environment. Whereas on the other side, what you're really getting is you're getting people who say, oh yeah, we need to take care of the environment, but they're not really engaged with doing it. Interestingly, this was a change because the Scouts in their origins were really much more, this is more mucking about, just playing about in the outdoors. The Scouts started out that way, but in the 70s, as people became aware of environmental problems, there became this big push to teach environmentalism. What these educators, and again, this is everybody from John Muir to E.O. Wilson, are saying is, let the kids muck about. Now, obviously, in a school situation, it has to be done. There's going to be restrictions on it, and you can't just do what kids could do maybe 50 years ago. But nonetheless, that is, they develop that love and interest, then they will grow to want to know more about it and to take care of it. So I think it's a very interesting discovery, this kind of research. There are people who are, jumping back and saying, is this really the truth of the matter? I'd say David Sobel has done an excellent job if you're interested in writing about it in this article, and it is linked. What I feel with the Kids Afield project is we're going partway there. We are making the kids the agent of what they're doing. This is not something the state's come up with. However, we can take the things that they're doing out there and easily, with a little creativity, say, oh yes, we're meeting this core example. So that's just, I'll get off my soapbox there, but I thought that this really struck home with me. With all the years I've spent outdoors, if I look back on what my kids over 25 years have learned about the outdoors, it's this, oh my gosh, look at this, and jumping and finding something and coming up with their own ideas about what it is. Sometimes we bring it back in the classroom and talk about it more. I used to feel, oh, I really needed to, let them be scientists and make sure they get the right scientific name and all those kinds of things. for kids up to age of 12, I don't think it's appropriate. And I think you lose it when you take them on nature trips where you say, here's this flower, rather than get down on your hands and knees, see how many flowers, what kinds of smells can you find? You know, let them come up with their own systems of classification. So, all right, this is a little bit, and I know we'll get the Voicethread and the sharing, because that is a real key part of this too. But this was an imagination thing that happened for us. We were out with the kids in the woods. This is the first group that I've worked with the longest, for 2 years. And suddenly, all the kids ran over to this tree and started taking pictures. And they said, we found Mousetown, Mousetown. We had no idea what Mousetown was. Well, it turned out that they worked, they have a specialty teacher, Jay Stetzer, who's a storyteller. And he had developed, he wanted them to understand that mice have their own world, and you shouldn't, when you see them in school halls, you shouldn't, occasionally they get into school, you shouldn't try, scream and yell and try to hurt them. So he had put together this very elaborate PowerPoint showing Mousetown underground. Part of me was saying, oh my gosh, I could see the core curriculum somebody saying to 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds, do you really think there could be electricity and all these things underground? Of course they don't. It's what made Beatrix Potter become the author she did. They know it's imagination, but they value it, and they are very excited when you respect their interest in it. They will clearly outgrow it, but they will also become the 10, 12, and 16-year-old who will say, oh my gosh, I remember when we discovered Mousetown. So that's a side of things that as people take cameras outside with kids, that I feel it's important that they don't jump all over and go the wrong direction. And I think that's also what was going on here, what David Sobel is talking about, that environmental education in some cases is turning kids off to the environment. So sharing, all right. Does everybody here, maybe you could just go up to the hand icon, and if you've used Voicethread, just click the hand and let me see. Yes, questions? Okay. So we make use of Voicethread, and for people who might see this presentation later on, just to give you a real quick overview of Voicethread, I won't spend a long time on it. Voicethread is an online tool for sharing information, visual information with text, the possibility of text input. It is not free, though, as has been pointed out to me, because it's not free, it's still around, versus plenty of programs that I've gone on to that were free and you lost them because they were bought up by a company. So it costs $79 a year for an individual teacher's account, which will give you ample space to make Voicethreads. If your school buys there's a cut price if the school goes in and buys a larger number of them. Our kids use Voicethread, their camera teams, they each create their own Voicethread. A Voicethread is a set of slides or a set of information, and so these are their teams. So what's wonderful about Voicethread is that once their slides are up there and they can be published to the world, they can be totally restricted, so that only, this is an educational Voicethread account that one gets. So you can restrict it so that only somebody who has permission can look at them. So for example, our parents, like a lot in today's world, are nervous about their pictures being all over there. You don't have to have pictures. We do have their pictures on here. But so our Voicethreads are, for the most part right now, somewhat restricted. But they can, if their parents bring up their pictures, and this shows their whole set of pictures for the students, they can make comments on them. They can make oral comments, and they can also make, they can type comments in. I don't have in my Storify, but I will put there. I have a great slide share that I made for parents showing them how to access the comment part of Voicethread. I just wanted to show you this slide. This wasn't one of our kids, but just to show you, this child has put up Happy 100 Days of School, and all of these icons on the side, if you clicked on them, you would either hear or see a comment from the person. So it's a very powerful way to share things for kids, for everybody. And you can share things globally, as I said, or you can make it very personally. A Voicethread will take anything you can scan, you can put into your Voicethread. So we had whole class discussions over some of the learning we had done outside, and then these could be projected in the classroom, and it becomes a nice way to archive what's gone on. And again, this was scanned in to show the assessment of our pictures. One of the things that has made this project so valuable is the portability. So this was a student picture. You come inside for the whole class. You can, there are a million inquiry things that go on here. As an adult, probably the first thing one's going to say is, gee, why is the snow all cleared back this far? What are all these vines? Children are going to look at it and have different ideas. But so depending on whether you're working on a lesson that you need to meet core curriculum standards, it just becomes a way for work that children have done to be integrated into work that perhaps is very adult driven. One thing that we often do, just as a starting point for conversations, is to ask children, why did you take this picture? What about it? What made it interesting to you? And that's where the empathy piece comes in, and other children can ask questions. We also put up slides that sometimes somebody had their finger over the front of the camera, or it's blurry, and that becomes a discussion in what did we do photographically that was problematic. Now, the school I'm working with now, Voicethread is not, it's not difficult to use if you're comfortable using tools, online tools that have a fair number of bells and whistles. For children as young as 5 and 6 years old, there was definitely a learning curve. We worked with the kids step by step, and we have a looped classroom, so it's really nice that the kids who have used it the first year can help others. But we were quite amazed at how quickly they did catch on to being able to use it. Do we sometimes have silly comments? Sure. And that just becomes a learning experience. There are other tools, however, and the school I'm working with now is in a situation that I have to say probably so many schools are in. It's a city school. Do they have a computer lab? Yes. Do they have a technologist or a computer teacher of any kind to help teachers? No. The teacher with whom I'm working has 4 iPads, has no idea how to use them, has not been given the time or the in-service to help with it. So I realized it was really necessary to look at other sharing options. I put 3 of them up here. The links for them are all in the Storify. And as Peggy has said over here, there is great, Voicethread has great support. They have Voicethread showing you how to use Voicethread. But the thing I run into again and again is that people say, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. These other programs, one is simply SlideShare, and SlideShare does have the possibility of adding a recording. So that's a simple one. Padlet, it used to be WallWisher, if people were familiar with WallWisher. It would enable you to put slides up, and you could have a station, and kids could come up to you one at a time and then give you information. You could type it right over their picture. So that's a fairly simple way to work. And Little Bird Tales, which I have actually not used myself, it's used at Harley School. My understanding from the technology teacher is that it's quite easy to use. In some ways, it's a more kid user-friendly version of Voicethread. But again, Voicethread, if you go to it and do the K-12, you will see that they have links to teachers using it with young kids. So it really depends on your needs and your school's needs and where teachers are. As I said, all of these link sites I have links to on Storify, on my Storify site. Padlet is Yeah, Padlet is in Storify too. It's, if you used to know Wall Wisher, it's a new version of that, or it's an updated version of it. So these are some extensions. Sharing, I also didn't mention that there is clearly room for sharing globally. It's something we haven't done at this point, really, because the teachers are enthusiastic, but they're, you know, the teachers at my independent school, really are as overwhelmed with other demands as at the public school, and we just I haven't been able to make that jump, but it certainly could easily be done. And then you could see so many neat applications. Kids taking pictures at the same time of day in one part of the world and another part of the world, or one part of the U.S. and another part of the U.S. I'm not going to read to you all these options, only to point out a few things that kids can come up with games with the cameras. I put a mystery picture up. It was actually a bunch of trees that had been eaten by deer, and I put it into the Voicethread of all the students, and the question was, what do you think happened here? They can also go out and take their own pictures, mystery pictures. Those kind of things they like a lot. We did also find that it is, if you're looking to relate it more to science, it's a great way to document changes, environmental changes. Plant damage, plant growth. This time of year, a neat thing to do is to put a piece of yarn around a twig and take pictures of the same twig over the next, next 4 weeks, because in New York State, the leaves are all going to finally come out. So these are just, I'll just let you look at them momentarily, but there's really no limit to what you can do when you start thinking about it. These are some pictures from student-generated experiments. They were interested in bird nest in the spring and what color threads would disappear first. So they put them all over the campus and took pictures of where they were, and then went back, and they had all sorts of questions. You know, do birds see color? Which ones will go? And then if it turned out the threads were gone, how do we know they were taken by birds? So that was a neat project. These are, again, just to show some of the pictures that they have taken and the questions. I also want to point out that this can be done on a school that is 100% blacktop, because then you have this great opportunity to go and find out, is there really nothing living out there? Actually, there's so much living in our buildings and our houses, if you knew the number of insects that we all live with and don't see. But you can go outside, you can find cracks in the ground, you can see plants coming up, you can certainly track where water flows. Then there's also, like the young girl in the classroom who looked out the window, you can stand with your camera and take pictures outside around the school. You know, what a great way to bring in the PTA or to have a meeting about, hey, you want kids who are aware of the environment. Our kids are never seeing anything but concrete. So it has endless possibilities. I guess here is a place that we could go. This is Storify. So I will jump here for a moment to application sharing, and we'll show you what I have on Storify. Except it didn't come up. Maybe I clicked on the wrong. Oh, there it is. So do people have this? So this is if you go here, this is the Kids Afield site. all of these links will take you, this is Little Bird Tales, will take you to the materials that I've discussed here. Somebody asked, what is Padlet? Here it is. You just link on this and it will take you to it. The article that I was talking about, The Problem with Environmental Education by David Sobel, that's this article here. Here's more on Hybrid Mind. It's a hodgepodge of materials that led to the program, including also some resources. This is the Natural Start site, E.O. Wilson's Advice for Future Scientists. And these are the references that I mentioned earlier, the Children in Nature Network, Wild Snapping. And then this is Voicethread 4K2. And this is really, it was a blog I recorded for the school when I was working as a contract worker to explain how I had become involved in it in the Kids Afield program. And down at the bottom there are actually a couple videos of our kids, including the one where they're talking with the storyteller, Jay Stetzer, about so yes, I think the videos do work that are over there. It's I have permission to have them up, but it's also a little bit contentious, so I don't show them at conferences, but people know that they are on this site and people can go look at them. The videos speak thunder in terms of so I don't know, let's see, do you have any questions? If you want, I also can talk real briefly about working with slightly older kids. I had the opportunity to have a nature photograph elective for 7th and 8th grade kids. And having experience with kids and cameras, for the most part, when they go on field trips, when they come back, you would not even know that they had a chance to, where they were, because all the pictures are of each other. So I was surprised when I had huge numbers of kids sign up. And they were very, very enthusiastic about taking pictures, looking at them, and we did approach this in a way. Somebody asked me with the little kids, do you talk about what makes a good picture? We do in the context of, we bring up a Voicethread picture and it's blurry. Why was it blurry? But with the older kids, they were really interested in knowing. Usually there'd be one child who was very good with the camera. And so other kids would want to know, what makes their picture so good. So we did have discussions about it. And this is sharing some of their pictures. Oh, that's a picture I took that I just brought in for the fun of it. So, in terms of what kinds of things that, again, that's what I was talking about, teach them about photography. Really, at the level of 5 and 6, it depended on, it was more what would make it successful for them. Now, you could use it. I've had kids say, why is there a hole in the middle? And you could jump off with this and go into all sorts of inquiry about, make pinhole cameras if you want to teach them about photography in that sense. But really, we were using it in the context of my 40 minutes in the classroom. It is pretty much geared towards making them agents of looking at the outdoors and sharing that information. And then work, right, just as somebody said, to work from letting them, become agents. And the other side of it is they know it's an important tool. They know everybody has cameras. So it empowers them, and it also is respectful of them in terms of letting them direct most of the course of what they do with those cameras. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. I can make it so you could ask if you want. I didn't. If people want to ask questions, especially if so few people, wouldn't be a problem. Yes, I think that's so true. That it makes one, there's so much learning as a teacher when you really listen to them and see what they're doing with these pictures and what they're paying attention to. And so often I think the tendency is to not hear what they say, but instead say, oh, they didn't see what I wanted them to. And then people make that ridiculous, well, I'm sorry, it's, they make that jump that I think is not educationally really sound. It isn't really how we learn. Yes, speaking a little bit about citizen science, I actually started out looking at citizen science projects, and we do some of that. But at a certain point, I became aware that I think citizen science is a great way to go, but I believe you could become an adult citizen science person and never really develop an empathy for the outdoors, because a lot of science, well, science more and more is going to be move into an area where, as a culture and a citizenry, we need to have discussions about how far do we want to go. Like, for example, the people who want to bring back the mammoths. Well, thank you, everybody, for getting up, some of you quite early, or actually probably quite late.
That has been such a great presentation, Robin. Thank you so much. I love the focus that you have on the discovery and the importance of letting them actually be the agents of their own learning. And your resources are so helpful to have those all combined in one Storify, and certainly the wiki is really helpful too. So I didn't see any other questions come up. So it looks like you've answered them for the moment. So thank you again for a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being the moderator. Okay.